Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to Cancast, which is our new podcast from the team at Cancard. And I have a couple of brilliant women with me today, Demi and Aimee, who are both women who use medical cannabis, who both are part of the Cancard community, and who both are managing with condition endometriosis on a daily basis. And yeah, so this is our focus, our podcast today on that, on women's health, on medical cannabis, and all these little bits in between. Lots of interesting facts and comments coming your way. So welcome to you both. Thank you for taking time out your day to come and talk to me. How are you both today? All right?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for your time, and I'm hanging in there today.
You're hanging in there today. So today's a rough day for you, yeah, in terms of maybe that would be a nice place to start then. Aimee, if you want to just kick us off, like maybe give us a little introduction to you and your sort of background with endometriosis and how you're feeling today.
Yeah, so I suppose how I usually start my story is that I got my period when I was 11 and quickly was suffering very, very drastically. Like within a couple of months, my mom took me to the GP to find out what was wrong, because I had three older sisters and she'd never experienced this with any of them. So it was really heavy bleeding, lots of pain. And he put me on the pill pretty much straight away and said, look, this is how we were going to manage this. So it's only in the last few years that I've tweaked how I start my story, because I got my notes from the hospital under the Freedom of Information Act, and it turned out that I was hospitalized 3 times between the age of 8 and 11. So before I'd even got my first period, I had symptoms of pelvic pain, nausea and vomiting and passing out with pain. So I suppose.
Do you remember those hospital visits? Is that something? No, not at all.
No. So like I said, I was telling the story from 11. It never dawned on me, and it never dawned on my mom either to put the connection together until like that. I requested the notes and then was reading back, and I was quite shocked, because I suppose among the endo community, many believe that it's your period, it's menstruation that starts it off. And so I suppose anecdotally we know then that that's not always the case, that some people do experience symptoms before their first period. But anyways, for the following 10 or 12 years, I was on every hormonal treatment kind of under the sun. So I had 4 Mirena coils. They wouldn't believe me when I said like it clearly wasn't working. So I had to try 4 of those. I had the bar in my arm and bled for 6 months straight. I had the injection, which caused incredible side effects. And I was just basically a guinea pig for 10 years after getting my period. And then I was diagnosed with endometriosis when I was 21.
And when you were 21, wow, that's a long period of time before you've had any kind of diagnosis. And Demi and I were just talking about that actually before you joined us on the podcast. And we were, I was looking up some facts about it this morning, and the average time for a diagnosis for a woman for endometriosis can be between 7 to 8 years, which is kind of what you were just saying there, which is just seems crazy, doesn't it? And so Demi, what's your story with endo? How did you realize that you had it? Was your time a little bit shorter between that and being given a diagnosis? What happened? What's with you?
So I'd say my symptoms started pretty much as soon as I started secondary school, so I didn't start my period until I was around 14, 15, but before then I always had trouble with my bowels. I could go like a full week, for instance, without going to the toilet, and I had really bad fatigue. So I remember I used to finish school and just go to bed, and then my mum would wake us up for my tea and I'd just go back to sleep. And at the time it was kind of just, I went back and forth to the doctors with my mum, and I tried different things, and then obviously I started my period, and that's when the word endometriosis got mentioned. But in terms of doctors helping us, it was kind of me having to advocate for myself. So I'd say from the age of 15, that was when the periods were like really heavy and severe, I'd have to take time off school. I would try different like hormone control, none of that worked. And I just remember every time I go to the doctors, they would tell us it was normal. They would say, look, you're just a girl, you're going through changes, this is obviously going to happen. And it wasn't until I would talk to my friends at school, I'd realise, oh, that this isn't normal. Not everybody has these debilitating periods, not everyone has these symptoms. Um, and then it actually wasn't until I'm 24 now, coming up 25, but it wasn't until I was in my 20s when I remember all summer I started to get like a dull, aching feeling at the bottom of like the left hand side of my stomach. And I remember thinking, oh, it's just because I'm due my period. But then that pain would start to happen like all month round. So then I spoke to a different doctor. And I think that's really key in, I guess, getting your diagnosis to find, even if you just have one person that's medically on your side, it really can make a world of a difference. So I described all the symptoms to her and she said, look, it sounds like endometriosis. And it just felt like even that was a relief. Which is weird to say because of course you don't want it, but I guess when you've been back and forth to the doctors for so many years, it really feels like someone's finally listening to you.
And did you feel that when coming back and forward to the doctors, you're almost becoming like a burden, or maybe, you know, somebody thinks that you're making it up, or, you know, I think just that constant back and forwards of a GP and getting absolutely nowhere and getting no support must also have quite a heavy emotional burden for you as well, because you're not feeling that anybody's listening to you and that you're almost, and then maybe I suppose there's a point where you're like, am I making this up? Is this normal? And I'm not understanding my own body. Did you feel like that at any point?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it got to the point where when I had seen different doctors and they were seeing similar things, it got to the point where I started to question whether or not the pain was even there. And I was thinking, is it even that bad? Am I just being dramatic? And I did feel like medically gaslit for the full duration up to getting diagnosed, which was over 8 years in total. But then I remember how I got my diagnosis was when I spoke to that doctor. She said, we're going to send you for ultrasounds and stuff. And I did feel like it was one step forward, two steps back, because as much as they have, I guess, regulations and stuff that they need to follow, ultrasounds have been pretty much useless for me. They never showed anything. It wasn't until I had a pelvic MRI that they found an endometrioma cyst on my left ovary, which obviously was an indication that not only was endometriosis there, but it was a sign that I was more advanced into the disease.
Yeah.
But the only way to get an official diagnosis is through a laparoscopy. So I remember talking to the doctor about that, and even at that point, they were saying, well, why do you want to go through with surgery when there's only a chance that you have something? Why would you want to do that yourself? And it was still up until that point where I just felt so dismissed.
Yeah.
And then I eventually pushed and pushed for surgery, and I only got my diagnosis in April last year.
Wow.
That's crazy. And you're nodding along with that as well, Aimee. Is that like surgery sounds extreme, but when you're in so much pain, you're thinking to yourself, actually, I'm prepared to go through with having that procedure to see if it'll make a difference. And have you had that operation? Have you had that procedure as well?
I've had 5.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've had 5. So my first one was when I was 21, when I got my diagnosis, and I didn't get a referral from my GP to the gynae in the traditional way. I had a close friend and family member that worked with a gynecologist who just happened to mention how my symptoms were happening and like how bad I was, and he kindly offered to put me on his list for an exploratory laparoscopy to see what was going on. And I was delighted with this because like that, I'd felt gaslit for so long at that point as well, saying that it may be all in your head, or your pain threshold may not be that high. Do you think maybe you're panicking or stress? And like, you do absolutely question yourself, is the pain real? Is this really happening? So I could have done cartwheels out of hospital when he told me, you have this thing called endometriosis. And I was going,
yeah,
oh, it's not all in my head.
Yeah, you've got a name for it now, I suppose, haven't you? You can be like, okay, this is a condition. I knew I wasn't crazy. This is
Exactly.
yeah.
But bless my heart, I was so naive. I had no idea what I was in for. So
Yeah.
at that point, he told me that I had spots of it and that he scraped it away, but he was going to refer me to a specialist. So he actually also told me that if I get pregnant, that it might help. So I wasn't even in a relationship at the time, and I just thought that it had very little disregard for my other circumstances. I just thought it was bad advice, which
Yeah.
I've come to find later it was actually terrible advice. But anyway, I went on the list then for the specialist, and after 3 years, I got an appointment with her. And by that stage, I had no hormonal treatment in those 3 years. And it was only then when I got that appointment and spoke to her, she explained to me that that's like having asthma and being on no inhalers. She said, this is a chronic condition that needs treatment and you need to be on hormonal medication. And so I swallowed everything that I was told. And she said, look, I'll book you in now for another laparoscopy. So I had the date for October, and then there was no beds. The Irish healthcare system, unfortunately, is absolutely awful. And so often the scheduled surgeries get cancelled because A&E have taken the beds because they don't have enough beds in the ER place. So it happens quite a lot. So anyway, it was cancelled a couple of times, and I eventually went ahead with it in December 2016. And so at that point then they told me it was stage 2. So I didn't even know about stages before that. So I carried on, I went back to work, but then I noticed that the pain was becoming more frequent, and it was becoming like 3 weeks out of the month maybe, instead of the usual 2 when I'm ovulating or when I'm menstruating. And so again, they decided to give me another laparoscopy. So they were only about 18 months apart, the two that I had together in with the so-called specialist in Ireland. And the third time it was stage 3, I think, and they told me that it had spread to my diaphragm. And I said, well, who removes it from my diaphragm? And the team said, oh, a general surgeon. So I was like, okay, then. No idea that that was terrible wild misinformation as well. Only a specialist should ever touch endometriosis, no matter what organ it's on. And so anyways, they had put in a 4th coil during that surgery. And it really made me worse than ever. So I had to quit my job, go on disability allowance at 26. And it took me 8 months to get a post-operative appointment to have the coil removed, because I knew it was causing severe added stress and trauma to down there. So at the appointment, I had discovered then that Dr. Mitroi in Romania had a specialist excision surgery team, and that they could remove it from my diaphragm as well. And so I begged them for a referral in the hospital here, and they told me no, they're going to do the exact same thing in Romania as we've already done, and you've exhausted all surgical and hormonal options. All you can do now is wait for pain management. And at that point, I'd been on the pain management list for 4 years. It was 5.5 years before I had a procedure. So like, it was just, no matter where I turned, I was getting doors slammed in my face. So I ended up borrowing the 10 grand privately myself and going to Romania. And I've since had 2 surgeries over there.
Yeah. And so you went elsewhere, you left the country and went somewhere else. And I just find, to me, that just seems absolutely crazy that you are constantly, for one, given such bad advice, given that it's such a condition that so many women suffer from. I find it really hard to understand why it takes so long to find a diagnosis. I think maybe because we're starting to talk about it a little bit more, women's health is starting to become a little bit more of a discussion topic. Women are starting to stand up, I think, and say, no, wait a minute here. You know, this is what we suffer from every month, whether that's endometriosis, whether it's just sort of your monthly cycle. I think women are trying to understand their cycle a little bit more now, whether it's sort of understanding that it's not just that 3 or 4 or 5 days of the month, it's an entire month cycle, and it affects you in so many different ways.
I also think, though, it's a cultural shift in that we no longer feel as much stigma, and we feel empowered enough to speak about these things, because Kathleen King, who's our oracle here in Ireland, like, she's advocating for over 30 years. And she said that 10 years ago, she couldn't even get women willing to speak to the media. And
Yeah.
now this year we had over 300 register for the Global Endo March that we took part in Dublin. So there has definitely been a shift in that we're more empowered to speak out about our suffering rather than suffering in silence. Do you know, and to say about being gaslit prior to diagnosis, I want to say that I've actually been more gaslit since being diagnosed, because I was still in such
Really?
tremendous pain and still not being believed. There's no way it could be that bad. We've checked, you know, your scans are clear. Everything has to be fine. Like, I had a psychotic break at one point. I wanted to literally slice my stomach open from one side to the other. So they were forced to look and see what was going on. Like, it took more of a toll on my mental health than it did my physical health.
And Demi, you're agreeing, you're saying absolutely. And I've never heard of that medical gaslighting. That's a new term for me, but you both are using it and agreeing and nodding along with each other. So that's obviously something that you both feel after. And so you then you've went through this whole process of trying to find a diagnosis, trying to manage the pain every day with it. How then did you find cannabis? Like, Demi, how did that first come into your life? How did you find cannabis, and how do you use that as a pain relief?
So I realised a while ago, obviously I'm only 24, and the medication that you get, I guess, when you've got a chronic illness, it's just opioids. So I would start on things like codeine and tramadol, and I basically worked my way up to things like morphine and oxycodone. And it just got to the point where, combined with your illness and all of the symptoms of that, combined with the medication and all of the side effects of that, it just gets to a point when you feel like you're not really yourself anymore, and you don't really know what it feels like to just be you without any hormones. Without any
strong. That's really strong medication as well, like painkillers. That's not like, you know, it's not, you know, there's no messing around with that. That's quite a serious level of painkillers that you are having to use on a daily basis.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think, like, it started off with me with just CBD. So I found that I was using it in a lot of daily things, like Epsom bath salts, that I'd have a really hot bath with those salts in when I was flaring. I take the CBD oil like every morning, take that twice a day, take it it will be my skincare, like bath products, literally everything. And then it got to the point where, so I made my account, I think last September. I made my endometriosis account on Instagram, and that was documenting my journey with endo and fibromyalgia. And I noticed there was a few people on there who would use medical cannabis. And of course, aside from using it like socially years ago, I was really serious about wanting to know the benefits. I wanted to know how you can use it and what that could mean. And I think it just got to the point where, because I was basically relying on the strong medication to get by, I really wanted to look at like natural remedies and supplements. So I reached out to a few accounts, and to be honest, this was only fairly recent for me. It's only been a few months. And I spoke to someone, and bless them, they had so much patience for me because I just had so many questions. And with combined with research and reaching out to other accounts and YouTube as well, like watching, I guess, different people speak about their experiences with medical cannabis, I feel as if honestly it opened a full new world for me. So I've been using it for a while now, and I use like a dry herb vaporizer. So I'll combine the THC flower with the CBD flower as well, because I find for me, if I was to just use something like THC alone, I can get anxiety because I'm already quite a naturally anxious person. But I find using the CBD, finding the ratio that works best for you, that really helps combat any adverse effects from the THC itself. So things like nausea and anxiety. So I use that combined with the CBD, and I have my next surgery for endometriosis next month. So I've planned to get like some RSO infused sweets to try. I'm gonna make some edibles. I just feel like it's really helped, I guess, with the mental side of things for me, because things like taking morphine every day, it really does take its toll. It's not somewhere where I want to be. So it has really helped me.
And you've noticed a significant difference in conditions and how you feel, not even on necessarily just a physical thing, on a mental side as well. You feel a little bit clearer, you feel less anxious.
Yeah, definitely. I feel as if it's just allowed me to switch off, because I feel as if my pain's worse first thing in the morning and then like last thing at night basically. So I find, especially with the vaporizer I use, obviously the different temperatures will make you feel a different way, I guess, produce more vape. I feel like on a night time when I can just switch off and I guess use the higher temperature, it also helps things, not just pain, but I feel like I can, for a while everything just goes mute in my head, and then I have a lovely sleep. I mean, I have a lot of insomnia because I struggle to get to sleep. I struggle to stay asleep. I'm always like awake during the night. So I find when I do use that, it's just an all round that it ticks so many boxes for me.
Yeah. And I use a dry herb, the same one as you. I think we had a conversation about this before. I use mine for sciatica a little bit, so I use the dry hair vaporizers, and they're so good. Like, once you learn how to use it and you know the temperatures and you know what you're using it on, I think there's such a good tool to help you if you're in a little bit of pain, just to take a little sort of inhale on your vaporizer. And also they don't smell a lot. They're quite discreet if you're out in the street or you're out in with family or wherever and you need to use it. They're a really good option. But it's great that you're making your own edibles as well now, so you're really getting into it and exploring how to use the plant. It's really great. And Aimee, so how did you find cannabis? What's your story, and like, what do you use? How often do you use it?
So my story is a little bit different. I began using cannabis at age around 15, and I just assumed that everybody felt better when they consumed cannabis. I didn't realize that the medical benefits were there until probably my mid-20s. It was when I started seeing the research papers and like that. Up to then, I just assumed everybody felt better, not knowing how effective it was being. And so I suppose when I did realize, that's when I started exploring about, well, how different strains can help different ailments. And I ended up getting in touch with the Endometriosis Network Canada, and I found out that they were running workshops for their patients about which strains were better for which symptoms and which ways to consume.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't actually been able to get onto one of those workshops. They haven't run them for a while, but I was so fascinated by the fact that that was an option somewhere else. And so I got all the research together and approached the pain consultant after waiting 5 years for the appointment, and approached him with my information, and he said, no way, he is not applying for cannabis. He doesn't believe in it for chronic pain, and this is why. And he showed me there was a European paper discrediting cannabis in chronic pain, and he said, I goes, but I know this is going to help me, like it's already been helping me. And he said, well, if you want to use that, you need to emigrate. That's what I was told. So I said, well, that's fine for me, but what about the other 1 in 10 that can benefit from it? Like, that makes no sense. So I didn't give up. I waited another couple of years and finally got another pain consultant who did, God bless him, he didn't even know that he could prescribe cannabis. That's how little the medical cannabis access program is known about, is educated upon, or is even out there. So I explained everything, the ins and outs of it, that I don't qualify for the medical cannabis access program, but I do qualify for a ministerial license should you back me up and apply for it on my behalf. So because I was so well versed in everything, I think that's what got me over the line. And so he applied for it, but only last year. So I'm only officially a medical cannabis patient for the last 5 months. Prior to that, I was a criminal.
Yeah.
And as well, I like what bothers me most about the distinction between medical cannabis and those who recreationally use is the label a patient. Like, if it takes us 10 years to get the label a patient for endometriosis, we're stigmatized, criminalized, and demonized for those 10 years before, oh, it's okay because she's not well. Like, I personally feel that any person who benefits therapeutically from cannabis should be considered a patient, and that any adult over the age of 18 should have the option to choose that if they want to. Like,
Yeah.
I was only in Leinster here in Dublin there a couple of weeks ago about endometriosis, saying there's a little under 250,000 women in Ireland with endometriosis, and God knows how many of the trans community and other communities that are not monitored very well. And I am only one with a cannabis license, just one in all of those people. It's ridiculous. It should be an option for everyone.
Yeah, it does sound crazy, isn't it, when you say that? And I think working towards changing attitudes for using cannabis is slowly getting there. We're sort of chipping away at it, and we're trying to find, platforms to speak about it, platforms to be able to educate. And it's not from I want to educate you on this. It's more a place of where, the three of us can have this conversation. And maybe there's a woman somewhere who listens to the podcast and goes, oh my God, I think they're talking about me, and they kind of join the dots, and then maybe they can find their own diagnosis, and then maybe they can find their own, journey with cannabis, be that, they start growing their own plants. Like, Demi, you were saying you're making edibles and you're getting into it and you're really interested in the plant and learning a bit about it. Maybe it sort of progresses into somebody growing their own. We're very big advocates of that at Cancard. And we're big advocates if you have the funds and you want to go down the medical route of a prescription, we're advocates for that as well. It's across the board of however you want to consume or wherever you want to, find your cannabis. That's what we really want to do, is promote it in that kind of level. So, I mean, and for those who don't know, Cancard is a medical ID card, which is recognised by the police. So we try and train as many police forces as we can up and down the country. So it's a validation that you are consuming cannabis for medical reasons, for medicinal reasons. And it really helps a lot of people who don't have a prescription, because they don't have that legal script to show somebody and say, look, it's a legal thing and I'm a legitimate patient. And so do either of you have a cannabis prescription, or have you gone down that route yourselves? Or I know you're both Cancard members, which is brilliant, which is great. Have you ever had to use that situation where you used your card, or you've had to discuss a prescription with someone to prove your eligibility?
Do you want to go first?
Yes, I do. So for me, I am very much like private sourcing at the minute. It's not obviously on the NHS, and it's not accessible for me, say, at this moment in time to, go to the private clinic. I have spoke with a few people who, I know the private clinics are very limited, even within like England. And I know a few people who have used them, but I think it is also worth noting that I guess some people think as well, once you have that, I guess, prescription and you're able to go there, sometimes it can actually work better for people, I guess, privately sourcing it, because sometimes the source can be better. I know a few people who said from their clinic it's very, very STEMmy. It's not exactly what you'd want, and they found if they went elsewhere and it's being sourced it privately, they've just managed to try.
That's quite a lot of, we hear that quite a lot, people are finding money to have a private prescription because they feel safer with that sort of legal document, and they have their Cancard and they have both, and they feel a lot safer. They don't have as much anxiety around that. But with that, you're letting go of maybe a kind of long-term relationship you've had with maybe a florist or somebody who you get your flower or your oils from, who have made the products with a bit of love, a bit of intention, and they know exactly what they're talking about. Whereas the clinics, the kind of discussion that we're having is that the quality of it is not as good as maybe what patients are used to.
The law then is really difficult as well. Like, so I have my prescription and the cost of it is absolutely colossal. Like, I don't even know if I can afford it this month. And it's only one strain that's available. So that's all I can have forever. And so I do still find myself having to dip into the private market to try and switch it up, whether it's the strain or whether like I need an edible, because like some days the dry hair is just not going to take away the contractions, because I've got adenomyosis also. and that causes pretty severe kind of contractions and really bad pain, back pain. And so the edible sometimes is what I need. And again, I'm returning to the private market for that. But we had an excellent horticulturist and a caregiver, what we'd call, because he wasn't charging patients for the Rick Simpson oil that he was producing.
Yeah.
And he got 5 years in prison about, I think it was 3 months ago. He was snatched from his family home for caring for these people because we don't have the laws here. So, you know, I feel like where the state is letting people down, we have people in the community who's taking this risk and risking their freedom to help their communities, and it's really upsetting. And if we had that right to grow, like we spoke about earlier, patients would have a lot more leeway and a lot more patient-centered management in, you know, involved in their care. Because I know myself what days I need an edible, what days this vape will be good enough for, what days I need the dry herb vape. I know my body best, and so I should be trusted to make those decisions.
Yeah. 100%. And it's just giving the power back to you, giving the power back to the patient, so they know how their body feels, they know what they need. And interesting that you say you swap it out between edibles and vapes and different strains, different terpenes. I think, like, when I talk to patients, I'm like just in awe of them a lot of the time, because they know so much more about it than I do. And I've worked in the space for about 5 years now, and I'm learning every single day. But when you talk to patients who have been managing conditions on their own without any support from doctors and GPs and specialists and surgeons and people that have been sort of dismissed them and said no, or, you know, they've sort of went, right, okay, I'll figure this out myself. And they've maybe started growing their own plants, and they know what strains to use at certain points in the day. They know what to expect when their body starts to flare up a little bit. They know what's coming within the condition. So, I mean, I think it's brilliant that you women are helping us sort of really promote medical cannabis and try and keep that going as much as you can, because I think it's brilliant. I think the more people that learn about it, the more the movement's going to grow, and the more eventually, you know, the people that make these decisions, be it within the NHS, be it within rewriting of the Misuse of Drugs Act, you know, wherever it is that we need to sort of update these out-of-date stigmas, these out-of-date opinions on using plant therapies as an alternative to pharmaceuticals.
I think it's important as well that, I don't know about Demi, but I know for myself, I'm not getting paid for any of this advocacy work, whether it's endometriosis or medical cannabis. And I'm involved with quite a lot of the larger cannabis reform groups within Ireland, and I'm an ambassador for various ones. And there was an article put out this week that we were being funded by multi-million euro companies to put this pro-cannabis propaganda out there. And I just want to make it very, very clear that I have to borrow petrol money to go to these rallies and these protests, that it's
Absolutely.
all out of my own pocket, that I've never been paid for anything like that.
Absolutely. And so if there's anybody listening that's starting up their own company or is looking for patients that are knowledgeable endometriosis and understand medical cannabis and the plant, these are two brilliant women on the podcast here. You can get their contact details from me should you need them, and contact these women and use these resources and pay you for these advocacy groups and these rallies that you're creating, and just creating a little bit more of educational content around the plant. And so just on that note, what were your conversations like with family members? Like when you said to them, I'm going to try cannabis, what was the reaction that you got from them? Demi, you want to tell me, was your mum happy to let you start to source cannabis and start to use cannabis?
Honestly, I just approached it really casually. I think sometimes because there is still such a stigma, and I mean, some people will say cannabis is a dirty word, I guess. Like, I think some people might overthink how they'd approach someone, because I know some people could be very anti-drug, or they wouldn't understand medical cannabis, but they'd understand something like morphine. I mean, to me, it doesn't really make sense, but I know that's because of my personal experience in trying both and knowing the effects. So I can't, I guess some people are very, like, they do have their opinions, but their opinions are maybe based off of like something they've seen or something they've heard, or people not using it in the same way.
Yeah.
But I just sort of, approached it casually, and I just said, I'm trying this. I mean, it was only a couple of weeks ago I seen my doctor, and that's when they had prescribed oxycodone, because they said like the morphine that I was taking wasn't really helping anymore. But I've tried the oxycodone, and just the way it makes us feel, it's like I haven't went back to it since, because it's just too much for me. And again, I think like the mental effects of it, not just physically being unwell, but mentally, it's not something I'd want to persist with. And because like people like my mum and other people in my family, my partner, they've never, I guess I've been lucky in that respect, because they've never been like judgmental with anything that I've tried. They know, they see how much pain I'm in, and obviously they care about me, they love me, they don't want me to be in pain. So for them, it's like, try something that works for you, and I recommend it to anybody, because I think sometimes people are afraid of trying something new, especially like medical cannabis, because of how it could be viewed. Where honestly, I just think it's, when you try it for yourself, like I keep saying, it's opened a whole new world for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if your mum or your, siblings or your partner or whatever, and they see the difference in you, it's a kind of night and day situation, isn't it? It's like in bed, not being able to move, sleeping, taking lots of morphine, taking lots of painkillers, and not having a life. And then all of a sudden, you found cannabis, you're using cannabis, you're up out of bed, you're maybe a little bit more active, you're not in as much pain. I mean, obviously it doesn't take away all of the conditions. You still have to manage it on a day-to-day basis, but it makes a big difference for you. And was your family okay about you trying it as well, Aimee? I feel as if maybe no,
not so
really.
much. So like I said, I began quite young. I was only 15, and my mum found me box, and that it caused huge arguments between, and it really broke down our relationship originally. But I'm not surprised, because I was underage. But as the years went on and I continued to use it, even with her disapproval, she saw that I busted the myths that she had in her head. So she had thought about cannabis as something that stops people from being motivated. They get lazy, they sit in their room, they just eat. All the stigma associated with it is what she watched me be the opposite to. And so that kind of helped her come around a lot more in that sense. And my mom, fair play to her, she's 77 this year. So we have quite a different generation for her. And she has come around so much quicker than my siblings have, because like that, she was the one who saw me on those horrendous painkillers. Palexia was the one that I was on for a very long time, and it's actually known as an end of life drug. Like no child and girl in their 20s wants to be on an end of life drug. And I was even stigmatized for that then with another doctor. And I was going like, do you realize I didn't write the prescription myself? Like you're annoyed with me for something that another doctor put
that
me
a
on.
colleague of yours has written me in the first place.
So I really felt like I was kind of all over the shop with that. And so my mom seen me go through all that trauma and all that with pharmaceutical meds, and so she came around really well, and it was so supportive. And now, I mean, they saw me on national television on RT prime time talking about being the first endometriosis patient to get a cannabis license. So they've all come around now. They know now what the story is.
Well, you were probably the in Glasgow or in Scotland, there's a saying called the talk of the steamy. I don't know if that's you have that kind of, that same kind of expression, and everybody was chatting about you. You were all,
the talk of the town is what we say here.
Chat of the steamy. But now you're leading the way, and there may be that way, people that part of your family are now really proud of you and are saying, yes, she is that person that's taking cannabis. She's the one that's changed her whole entire life on her own because she did not give up on herself.
I wouldn't listen to the stigma.
So fair play to you, Aimee. We need more women like you who can step outside and lead the way a little bit, because not everybody's a leader, so that's a difficult place to put yourself in. But when it comes to the Cancard, so obviously we've created this podcast around Cancard to promote the Cancard and just to let people know that it's there. It's an option should they want to join the community, so they have it on them. So we've had so many positive results, over 3,000 positive police stops, where the police have an understanding of medical cannabis, have an understanding that not everyone can afford a private prescription. So when they show them the Cancard, we understand you're consuming your cannabis just now because you really need to. It's not because you fancy it.
I thought you needed a prescription to get a Cancard, no?
No, see, that's a kind of common misconception, that the Cancard initiative was set up for people initially who couldn't afford that route, who couldn't afford a prescription.
Oh.
So you don't necessarily need to have a prescription to have a Cancard, but you can certainly have both.
Yeah.
But if you choose to not go down the medical route, you maybe grow your own, you have a florist that you get your cannabis from on a regular basis, and your Cancard just shows you that the third party or the police that you are using this cannabis as a medicinal product. You have a legitimate patient and you have a legitimate condition that you're managing it for. So we've had over 3,000 positive stops, no arrests, no fines, and more importantly, I think the patient or the person's been able to keep their cannabis. They've been able to go home without it being confiscated, because having your cannabis taken off you, I think, is even more of a traumatizing idea to be in than having a fine, I suppose, to pay, because then you don't have any of your medicine if you need it for the rest of the day or for the few days that's in front of you until you can source some more.
And it's very I think that's the most degrading part.
Yeah.
Is that somebody else at one point did have the power to just snatch my medication and not give it back.
And take it.
I wouldn't be able to afford a fine and my prescription. I can barely afford the prescription on its own.
Exactly.
So definitely the card makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And has it made a huge difference for you, Demi? Have you used your card at any point, or do you just have it on your person and it makes you feel a little bit more secure about having cannabis in your bag or in your pocket? Or
So I keep it in my purse, so every time I leave the house, it's always with me. And I got it because I feel like it's an extra level of like security and protection. That's the way I see it. And as much as I'm kind of still trying to find what works best for me, I feel like currently I would use like my dry herb on a night time. But it's I guess knowing if I would like to go outside and use it, which I think obviously summer's coming up, it's going to be nicer. It's just having that card there. I just feel like for me, it's peace of mind.
Me too.
And yeah, like I was put on Cancard by someone on Instagram, and the Instagram is being prescribed cannabis. And like I said, I had so much time for me with any questions I had. So then not only did I discover Cancard through this person, but they were able to give me lots of advice. They were able to like put me in touch with different people, and from there I just feel like it's definitely made so much of a difference for me, and it's something that I'm going to continue using daily.
Yeah. And it's nice to hear that you've got the Cancard, you feel safe, you feel a bit more secure to have it, but also it's kind of opened up doors for you to meet other people, maybe other people that use cannabis for endometriosis or any other condition. I mean, the list of conditions you can use it for is kind of endless, to be honest, really, isn't it? Well, thank you so much for your time, both of you. I really appreciate you taking time out your day and coming on and talking to me. And yeah, it's just been really lovely to meet you in person. I've been saying to Demi as well, we kind of talk on Instagram. And so my name's Victoria. I do all the comms and all the social media within the Cancard on Facebook and Twitter and our LinkedIn and our Instagram. So I talk to lots of people all the time throughout the day. So it's really nice to actually finally meet you in person and have a chat with you and learn a little bit about you and your story. And hopefully one day we'll all be able to hang out in person. We're going to try and get a sort of Cancard on tour thing happening where we're going to bring it to some of the sort of major cities across the UK. So maybe
that would be amazing. Actually, I met Carly at Product Earth last year. I'd say she'll probably be there this year too.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to be attending Product Earth. It's going to be a good one this year, I think.
See you then. So, I have my tickets.
You got your tickets. Great. Yeah, it's going to be really good because I just think these kind of environments are so nice to bring patients together where we can support each other and we don't feel anxious or nervous, or you don't feel like an outsider. You feel as if you're part of a community when you're at these kind of events. So we really wanted to try and bring the Cancard community, sort of bring it on the road a little bit. Sounds a little
incredible.
Yeah, Cancard on
tour. We'll touch, but keep it linked in with that, because like that we can get some support from the various cannabis organizations then in Ireland to support you in the different locations, and
absolutely,
we'll connect on that.
Yeah, and bring all the patients together, maybe have some patient ambassadors in each city that we can start to just link everybody up together within the one place.
Yeah, that'd be incredible.
Yeah, but thank you so much for coming on and talking and being very honest and open and letting me know everything about your journey, and I really appreciate it. So just a little reminder, this is the Cancast podcast, and it will be coming out on Spotify in the next couple of days. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram. We now have a page on TikTok as well, would you believe? Facebook, all the usual platforms. And yeah, we'll catch up with you all soon. See you soon.